I am 96 years old, and I need to tell you the most dangerous thing I ever did. I waited. That's it. That's the confession. Not murder. Not gambling away a fortune. Not some dramatic betrayal that makes for a good movie. No, I just waited. I waited my entire life for someone, something, some miraculous phone call to come and rescue me from the ordinary hell of my own making. And I want you to understand something before I go any further. This hallway I'm standing in right now, this dim, creaky hallway that smells like stale coffee and old wood and decades of nothing happening. This is where my story ends, right here, right next to this small wooden table with a telephone sitting on it. Look at it, an old landline, beige. The cord is slightly tangled, the way it's been tangled since probably 1987. There's a thin layer of dust on the receiver. It's perfectly placed, perfectly still, like a museum piece, like something you'd find in a dead man's house. And the truth is, that's exactly what it is. Because the man who sat next to this phone every single day for 60 years, waiting for it to ring, that man has been dead for a long, long time. He just forgot to stop breathing. I used to hover my hand over this thing every morning, every single morning. I'd reach out, and my fingers would get close enough to feel the cool plastic, and I'd think, today it rings. Today somebody calls with the answer. And it never did. That phone hasn't rung in years. But here's what should terrify you. The tragedy isn't that it stopped ringing. The tragedy is that I still expected it to. Let me take you back. Let me show you how a man builds his own cage and then spends a lifetime waiting for someone else to unlock it. I was 23 when the lie took root, and I call it a lie because that's exactly what it was, even though at the time it felt like faith. The lie was simple. Someone is coming. Someone is going to see my potential. Someone is going to reach down and pull me up and hand me the life I deserve. I believed that the way some people believe in God, quietly, completely, without evidence. I was a man of average talent. Let me be honest about that. I wasn't stupid, but I wasn't brilliant. I wasn't lazy, but I wasn't driven either. I was the kind of man who could have done something decent with his life if he'd ever bothered to start. But starting felt unnecessary because the call was coming. In my 20s, I turned down a job at a small company because I was waiting for a better offer. A friend of mine, Wallace, he took that same job, started in a back office somewhere, answering mail. Within 10 years, he was running a division. Within 20, he'd retired comfortably. But me, I was still sitting by the phone, still wearing cheap aftershave and ironing my one good shirt for interviews I never actually scheduled. I'd lay that shirt out on the bed every Sunday night, press it perfect, hang it on the door like a uniform, ready, always ready. But I never put it on and walked out the door toward anything real. In my 30s, I thought a woman would save me. I married Helen, sweet woman, quiet, patient. Too patient, honestly. I kept telling her things would change. I'd say, when the right opportunity calls, everything will be different. And she'd nod. She'd smile in that way people smile when they've already started grieving. She left when I was 41. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She just packed one suitcase, stood in the doorway, and said, "I can't keep waiting with you, Arthur. You're not waiting for something. You're hiding from everything." I watched her walk down the front steps, and I thought, fine, someone better will come along. In my 40s and 50s, I convinced myself a mentor was around the corner, some wise, wealthy person who would take me under their wing and show me the way. I'd read stories about men who'd been discovered late in life, plucked from obscurity by some generous hand. That was going to be me. I rehearsed gratitude speeches in the bathroom mirror. I actually did that. I stood there with shaving cream on my face, thanking imaginary benefactors for believing in me. Meanwhile, the phone sat on its little wooden table, silent, and all around me I could hear the muffled sound of other people's lives happening. Phones ringing in other apartments, doors opening and closing, laughter down the hall. The whole world was moving, and I was standing perfectly still, holding my breath, listening for a ring that never came. Now I need to tell you about the day everything cracked open, and I need you to stay with me here, because this part is not dramatic. It's not cinematic. That's what makes it so terrible. It was the quietest catastrophe you can imagine. It was a Tuesday. I know it was a Tuesday because the garbage trucks come on Tuesday mornings in my neighborhood. And by the afternoon, after they've gone, the street gets so quiet you can hear your own heartbeat. I was 91 years old. 91. I was sitting in my armchair, the faded green one, with the fabric worn thin on both arms, positioned right next to that little wooden table, right next to that phone. The blinds were half closed, and the afternoon sunlight was cutting through in narrow bars, hitting the carpet at an angle. I could see dust motes floating in those bars of light, thousands of them, just suspended, going nowhere, lazy little particles drifting in silence. And it occurred to me that I looked exactly like them. The room smelled the way it always smelled, old wool from the armchair, lemon disinfectant from the kitchen, a faint trace of the soup I'd heated for lunch, something from a can, tomato, I think. The kind of soup a man eats when he's stopped caring about feeding himself well. The kind of soup that says, I'm just maintaining the body, I'm not living in it. I sat there and I stared at the phone. Not glanced at it, stared. I stared at that beige plastic receiver for 3 hours. I know that because when I first sat down, the clock on the wall read 1:15, and when I finally moved, it read 4:22. 3 hours and 7 minutes of pure silence. No traffic outside, no voices from the hallway, no television, because I'd stopped turning it on months ago. Just silence so thick it had texture. You could almost chew on it. It pressed against my eardrums like water, and about 2 hours in, a fly landed on the receiver, a single housefly. It sat there on the curved top of the phone, rubbing its legs together the way flies do, perfectly content. And I watched it. I watched that fly sitting on my telephone, and something inside my chest started to collapse. Not my heart, not a medical event. Something worse, a structural failure of belief. Because in that moment, staring at a fly sitting comfortably on a phone that hadn't rung in years, I understood something with the kind of clarity that makes you physically sick. My stomach turned. My mouth went dry. My hands gripped the arms of that chair so hard, my knuckles turned white, and I thought I might actually vomit right there on my own carpet. The truth hit me like this. Nobody was coming. Nobody had ever been coming. There was no plan. There was no file with my name on it sitting on some angel's desk. There was no mentor watching me from a distance, waiting for the right moment. There was no second chance being prepared behind the curtain. The phone was not about to ring. The phone was never going to ring. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. And the worst part, the part that made me feel like the walls were closing in, was this. The world hadn't forgotten me. That would have been easier. If the world had simply overlooked me by accident, I could have forgiven that. But the world hadn't overlooked me. The world had simply accepted the version of me that I presented, the version that never acted, the version that never called anyone first, the version that sat in a chair with his hand hovering over a receiver, waiting, always waiting. I trained everyone around me to expect nothing from Arthur, and the world, being efficient, adjusted accordingly. It stopped offering. It stopped knocking. It moved on, not out of cruelty, out of accuracy. I sat in that chair as the sunlight moved across the carpet and eventually disappeared. The room got dark, the fly left, and I stayed. I stayed because I didn't know what else to do. I had spent 60 years building a life around the expectation of rescue, and in one silent Tuesday afternoon, the entire architecture collapsed, and underneath it, there was nothing. No foundation, no backup plan, just a 91-year-old man in a dark room, realizing he had volunteered for his own abandonment. That was 5 years ago. I am 96 now, and the phone still sits on that table. I haven't moved it. I should. Lord knows I should. But I can't bring myself to unplug it, and I think I know why. Because unplugging it means admitting completely and finally that the waiting was all there ever was, that the waiting was my life, not the preamble to my life, not the introduction, the whole thing. 96 years of throat clearing before a speech that never began. Every morning I wake up in this apartment, and the first thing I see when I shuffle out of the bedroom is that phone on its little table. And it greets me the way a headstone greets a visitor. Quiet, permanent, a monument to something that is finished. There are no children coming to visit. I postponed having a family. I told myself I'd start one when things stabilized, when the right call came, when I was ready. Well, I was never ready, and now the apartment is empty. There are no old friends stopping by either. They called for a while, they did. Wallace called. Helen, even after the divorce, she called a few times. But people get tired of talking to a man who's always about to start living. Eventually they hung up. Eventually the calls thinned out and then stopped, the way rain stops. Gradually, and then all at once. Now the only sounds in this apartment are the sounds of maintenance, my own breathing, a faucet that leaks in the kitchen, 1 drop every 4 seconds, I've counted, the creak of my weight on old floorboards, the smell of dust and reheated soup, and the faintly sour scent of a life that was stored but never used. This apartment isn't a home, it's a waiting room, and the appointment was never real. That tangled cord on the phone, I look at it sometimes and I think it looks like a knot I tied decades ago and never untied. A knot that represents every decision I refuse to make, every door I refuse to open, every morning I refuse to be the one who dialed first. So now I'm talking to you, yes, you, and I need you to hear me with both ears, because I am not going to say this gently. You are sitting next to your own phone right now. Maybe it's not a landline. Maybe it's not even a phone. Maybe it's a fantasy you keep alive, a someday you keep polishing, a someone you believe is going to appear at the exact right moment and hand you permission to begin. You're waiting for the job offer you didn't apply for, the apology from someone who doesn't think about you, the inspiration that strikes like lightning while you sit on the couch doing nothing. You are waiting, and that waiting feels safe. It feels responsible. It feels like patience. But I am here to tell you, from 96 years deep inside this trap, it is not patience. It is suicide in slow motion. Nobody is coming. Do you hear me? Nobody. Not your parents, not the universe, not some algorithm that's going to magically surface your hidden talent. Not luck. The cavalry you've been listening for, that thundering sound of rescue on the horizon, it doesn't exist. It was always just your own heartbeat. The cavalry was always just you, standing in front of a mirror, refusing to recognize yourself. Stop rehearsing helplessness. Stop practicing the art of almost starting. Stop waiting for the phone to ring and pick it up and dial. Dial anything. Dial the wrong number if you have to. But do something with your own 2 hands before those hands can't grip anything anymore. I know what I have to do now. I've known for 5 years, and I've been too much of a coward to do it. But I think today is the day. That phone on that little wooden table, the one I protected like a shrine, the one I've dusted around but never dusted off. I think it's time to pull the cord from the wall. Not because I've given up. It's too late for that to matter. but because I want one single moment in 96 years where I am the one who acts first. So that's what I'll do. I'll reach over and I'll pull the plug, and the phone will go dead. And for the first time in my life, the silence won't be the sound of waiting. It'll be the sound of being done.